Gentlemen, let's talk about something most men think about late at night, but rarely admit during the day. What really happens to your body when you go months or even years without sex? Some say it makes you stronger. Some fear it slowly destroys your confidence. Others pretend it doesn't matter at all. But deep inside, many men quietly wonder, is my body changing? Is something breaking inside me? Or am I actually becoming stronger without realizing it? Stay with me till the end of this video, because what you're about to hear isn't designed to scare you or flatter you. It's designed to tell you the truth. And for many men, this truth explains feelings they've never been able to put into words. Chapter 1. The silent shift inside your brain. When a man goes a long time without sex, the very first changes don't appear in his body. They begin quietly inside his brain. And that's why most men don't recognize what's happening. There's no pain, no obvious warning sign, no dramatic moment where something breaks. Instead, the brain slowly adjusts to a new normal, and that adjustment can feel confusing if you don't understand it. Sex is one of the strongest natural stimulants for the male brain. During sexual activity, the brain releases dopamine, the chemical of motivation and reward. It also releases oxytocin, which creates bonding, calmness, and emotional warmth, and serotonin, which stabilizes mood and reduces anxiety. When sex disappears for a long time, these chemical surges don't vanish, but they become less frequent. The brain doesn't panic, it adapts. And that adaptation is where the silent shift begins. At first, nothing feels wrong. Life continues. You work, eat, sleep, and go about your routine. But slowly, some men notice a subtle emotional flattening. Not sadness, just less excitement. Things that once felt rewarding now feel neutral. Music doesn't hit the same. Achievements feel less satisfying. This isn't weakness or depression. It's the brain recalibrating its reward system due to reduced stimulation. For some men, this shift shows up as restlessness. They feel on edge without knowing why. Others feel mentally foggy or less motivated. The brain is searching for the dopamine it once received easily, but if no healthy replacement exists, such as purpose, physical activity, or deep engagement, it begins to feel understimulated. That's when boredom turns into frustration, and frustration quietly turns inward. However, here's the part most men never hear, and it's crucial. The brain does not require sex to function optimally. What it requires is meaningful stimulation. When sexual stimulation is removed but replaced with focus, discipline, learning, creativity, or physical effort, the brain rewires itself in a powerful way. Dopamine begins to come from achievement instead of pleasure. Many men report sharper thinking, better impulse control, and a stronger sense of self during this phase. But if sex disappears and nothing replaces it, no purpose, no movement, no emotional connection, the brain begins to associate silence with emptiness. This is where men start feeling disconnected, not just from others, but from themselves. It's not that desire disappears. It goes underground. Unexpressed energy builds quietly, often emerging as irritability, overthinking, or emotional withdrawal. This silent shift inside the brain explains why two men can experience long-term sexual inactivity in completely different ways. One becomes focused, disciplined, and calm. The other becomes tense, dull, or frustrated. The difference isn't sex. It's what fills the space sex once occupied. Understanding this chapter is critical, because once you recognize that the brain is simply adapting, not failing, you regain control. You stop fearing what's happening inside you. And when fear disappears, clarity takes its place. Chapter 2. Why some men feel stronger, not weaker. When men go long periods without sex, an unexpected phenomenon often occurs. Some don't feel deprived at all. In fact, they feel stronger, calmer, and more in control than they did before. This confuses many people, because society constantly repeats the idea that sexual activity is essential for male strength. But biology tells a more layered story. Sexual energy is one of the most powerful forces in the male nervous system. When it is released frequently, it creates relaxation and pleasure. But when it is retained, the body doesn't shut it down. Instead, that energy looks for a direction. And if the man has structure in his life, routine, goals, responsibility, that energy gets redirected into focus, discipline, and drive. This is why some men report sharper thinking, increased willpower, and emotional stability during periods of abstinence. Their brain is no longer riding frequent dopamine spikes from pleasure. Instead, it begins generating dopamine from achievement. Completing tasks feels more satisfying. Effort feels meaningful. The mind becomes quieter, less scattered. There's also a psychological component. When a man realizes he can function, perform, and remain confident without sexual validation, something shifts internally. He becomes less reactive, less desperate for approval, less controlled by impulse. This internal independence often feels like strength, not because sex is bad, but because self-mastery is powerful. However, this strength only emerges when abstinence is intentional or accepted, not when it is experienced as rejection or failure. Men who view their sexual inactivity as proof of inadequacy don't feel stronger. They feel diminished. The difference lies entirely in mindset. Chapter 3: Testosterone. The myths and the reality. One of the biggest fears men carry is the belief that going without sex will destroy their testosterone. This fear is understandable, but it's largely built on misunderstanding. Testosterone does not drop simply because a man isn't having sex. In the short term, testosterone levels often remain stable, and in some cases even rise slightly. The male body does not punish restraint. What lowers testosterone over time is stress, poor sleep, inactivity, obesity, and emotional defeat. When a man stops having sex and simultaneously stops moving, stops caring for himself, and starts mentally withdrawing, testosterone slowly declines, not because sex is missing, but because vitality is missing. Testosterone responds to signals of strength, movement, confidence, challenge, purpose. This explains why older men who stay physically active, mentally engaged, and emotionally grounded often maintain healthy testosterone levels, even with limited sexual activity. Meanwhile, younger men with frequent sex but poor lifestyle habits may still suffer from low testosterone. Sex reflects testosterone. It doesn't create it. Chapter 4: What really happens to your erections? This is the chapter many men quietly fear the most. Erections are not powered by desire alone. They are powered by blood flow, nerve sensitivity, and tissue health. When erections don't occur for a long time, whether through sex or spontaneous arousal, the penile tissue receives less oxygen-rich blood. Over extended periods, this can reduce elasticity and responsiveness. Erections may feel weaker, slower, or less reliable. But this process is not sudden, permanent, or inevitable. What actually protects erectile health is circulation. Men who walk daily, stretch, breathe deeply, hydrate properly, and sleep well often maintain erectile capacity, even during long periods without intercourse. Erections don't disappear from lack of sex. They disappear from lack of blood flow and nervous system activation. This is why men who remain physically alive in their bodies rarely lose function completely. The penis is a mirror of overall vascular health, not a punishment for abstinence. Chapter 5: Confidence, Identity, and the Quiet Ego Shift. Beyond hormones and blood flow lies something deeper: identity. For many men, sex has always been tied to self-worth. Not consciously, but emotionally. When sex disappears, confidence can quietly erode. Not through dramatic sadness, but through subtle behavioral changes. Less eye contact, softer posture, reduced assertiveness. But here's the turning point many men never reach. Confidence does not come from sex. It comes from self-respect. Men who replace sexual validation with discipline, grooming, routine, learning, and physical presence often rebuild stronger confidence than before. They stop needing proof of masculinity from outside sources. Their identity stabilizes. Sex amplifies confidence when it exists. It does not create it. When a man learns this, something profound happens. He stops fearing periods of sexual silence. He stops defining himself by access or performance. And paradoxically, this inner stability often makes him more attractive, not less. Chapter 6. Emotional effects men never talk about. Gentlemen, this is where things get quiet, because most men never say these words out loud. When a man goes without sex for a long time, the emotional changes don't arrive suddenly. They creep in. Slowly. Silently. And because men are taught to suppress emotion rather than analyze it, many never realize what's happening inside them. At first, there's emotional numbness. Not sadness. Not anger. Just flatness. Things that once excited you, music, conversation, ambition, start to feel muted. This isn't because you've become weaker. It's because sexual connection is deeply tied to emotional expression. When it disappears, emotions don't vanish. They get buried. Over time, many men experience increased irritability. Small frustrations feel bigger. Patience shortens. This happens because sexual release helps regulate stress hormones like cortisol. Without that outlet, stress accumulates internally, often leaking out as anger or withdrawal. Then comes emotional isolation. Even when surrounded by people, a man may feel disconnected. Conversations feel surface level. He listens, but doesn't feel seen. This isn't loneliness in the traditional sense. It's emotional disconnection from oneself first, then from others. Some men begin questioning their worth. Not consciously, but subconsciously. Thoughts like, am I still desirable? Or is something wrong with me? Start to whisper in the background. These thoughts aren't always loud, but they shape behavior. Less confidence, less initiative, less risk-taking. Chapter 7. When abstinence becomes harmful. Now listen carefully, because this is where the conversation becomes honest. Abstinence itself is not harmful, but unconscious abstinence, abstinence without purpose, clarity, or emotional grounding, can be. When a man avoids sex not by choice, but by fear, shame, rejection, or exhaustion, the absence starts shaping his identity. He doesn't just lack intimacy, he begins believing he's unworthy of it. This is when suppression turns into repression. Repressed sexual energy doesn't disappear. It transforms, sometimes into anxiety, sometimes into compulsive habits like overeating, endless scrolling, pornography addiction, or emotional shutdown. The body seeks release somewhere. Long-term abstinence without emotional expression can also distort how a man views women, either idealizing them unrealistically or emotionally detaching from them entirely. Both extremes damage real connection. There's also a physical dimension. Libido doesn't vanish, it adapts. Testosterone may fluctuate. Morning erections may become inconsistent. Not because the body is broken, but because arousal pathways are underused. But the most dangerous effect is psychological resignation. When a man quietly accepts a sexless life without examining why, he may stop pursuing growth altogether. He stops grooming, stops dreaming, stops improving. Not out of laziness, but out of silent surrender. That is when abstinence stops being discipline and starts becoming decay. Chapter 8. How to stay powerful without sex. Here's the chapter that changes everything. Because the goal is not constant sex. The goal is power, clarity, and vitality, with or without it. A powerful man does not depend on sex for confidence. He channels sexual energy instead of wasting it or suppressing it. When sex is absent, energy must move elsewhere, or it will turn inward and suffocate you. Men who thrive during periods without sex redirect that energy into strength, purpose, and mastery. Physical training becomes non-negotiable. Not just gym workouts, but movement that reminds the body it is alive. Walking, lifting, stretching, breathwork. Mental discipline becomes sharper. Reading, learning, creating. These activities engage the same dopamine circuits that sexual novelty activates. The difference? These build instead of drain. Emotional expression is critical. Writing, speaking, journaling, or even silent reflection allows bottled emotions to release without shame. A man who understands his emotions controls them. A man who ignores them is controlled by them. Connection replaces consumption. Deep conversations. Brotherhood. Purpose-driven work. Human connection doesn't always require sex, but it always requires presence. And finally, intention. If you are without sex, let it be a season, not a sentence. Let it sharpen you, not hollow you. Let it prepare you for deeper intimacy rather than convince you that you don't deserve it. Because a man who knows how to stand strong without sex becomes unstoppable when intimacy returns. Closing message. Gentlemen, if this video spoke to you, if something here felt uncomfortably accurate, then stay with me. Because in the next video, we'll talk about how men can rebuild desire, confidence, and masculine presence at any age, without desperation, without gimmicks, and without losing self-respect. This isn't about sex. It's about who you become when no one is touching you, but life still demands strength.